So the community wanted to celebrate this exciting event of 150 years of women's suffrage and women's voting rights in Wyoming. I was so honored to be asked to tell this story because not only is it an important part of history that I think we all really need to know, and we don't all know this, but telling women's memoirs and bringing women's stories to the stage is what I want to do with the rest of my life. So this was a perfect fit, perfect artistic fit. I was thrilled and inspired and honored to be able to do this. I decided to name the piece Julia, Louisa, Esther after three women who I think had a very important role in starting this new phase of Wyoming's history. We have Julia Bright, whose husband was a saloon owner, and he was also the person who brought the bill for women's voting rights to the legislature, and they must have had many a conversation around their dining room table about this issue, and so I'm sure that she must have had some influence in this, and that's why her name starts the piece. And then we have Louisa Ann Swain, who, legend has it, was on her way into town to get some yeast for bread baking and decided to cast a ballot along the way because that ability had just been opened up for her. And so Louisa Ann Swain was the first woman to cast a ballot. Esther was the first woman in Wyoming to be elected as a public official. And she was elected as Justice of the Peace. And I thought that was a very fitting final person and final story to have be part of the title of the work. The first movement begins with bass drum and bass, and at such a quiet dynamic that you only feel it before you hear it. And this was me thinking of herds of wild horses coming up across the hill, and you don't see it, but you hear it first for a while. And then we get into a really riotous section with all of the instruments playing very rhythmic, very fast. There's cowbell, there's a snare drum. There's also harmonies that are just dissonant enough that you feel like there's some threat in the air. This was very much inspired by my time visiting the Trails Museum, where I came face to face with very poignant, very heartbreaking stories of what settlers went through when they were coming here and settling here. And I was so inspired by their courage to make a new life and all of the travesties that they came across while they were trying to make that change. And that's why we have this exciting, but also slightly frightening first movement. I was able to go on a little road trip up to Cody, Wyoming, and being from Michigan, I'm used to things being very flat, and so my brain can't really compute mountains. And being able to spend all this time driving through Wyoming and seeing the terrain change and seeing a new painting out of the car window every moment was very inspiring. Usually composers are given a commission and they're expected to be able to write just from their own experiences. And since I'd never experienced Wyoming, it was really lovely to be able to paint music from my own memories. And in the second movement, you're going to hear soft sort of moonlight music, and you're going to hear stars sparkling in the piano and the harp. And that was very much influenced by a drive back from Cody when I saw a gorgeous sunset happening literally in the passenger rear view mirror. And I saw the moon in the rear view mirror for so long, and I took so many photos of it. And that image haunted me when I went back to New York and was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with this piece, and made me realize that I needed a very big canvas to write this piece on, because I knew that I wanted to not just write about the way in which people got together and created this important political change, but I wanted to be able to write about the stage on which that all happened, which is the land of Wyoming. I was able to sit down with the historian Tanis Leverchek-Saunders, and she told me for about 2 hours the real nitty-gritty and the backstory and all of these sort of hidden stories about women's suffrage and what went into the fight for voting rights for women. And I was horrified, frustrated, and inspired. And I decided to make the third movement of the piece be representative of all of these conversations that had to happen between families, between friends, and eventually between lawmakers to make this dream a reality. And so in the music, you're going to hear melodies chasing each other around the orchestra. You're going to hear conflict between different parts of the orchestra, conflict between instruments. It's very exciting, it's very fast and frenetic and kinetic, just like I imagine that many of these arguments and counter-arguments as the people of Wyoming tried to figure out what they wanted to do and why with regards to women's suffrage. A person's right to vote is such an important part of our experience as an American and our duties as an American. And I wanted to make sure that that sense of urgency and that emotion was in this part of the work. The fourth movement is shorter, but it starts off with a melody that I hinted at in the second movement. This melody just grows and grows, and I was thinking of this like the women's theme, and I wanted to be able to have this expand and really take over the entire orchestra and really be written in such a way that it gives the audience goosebumps and that they really feel this sense of triumph after such a huge struggle. And again, not only thinking about how these women left their homes on the other side of the country and came here and settled here and made a new life here in such a courageous way, but also the triumph of being the first to recognize such an important human right. When you go to the movies, you resonate with whatever character in that film resembles you in some way. Maybe you feel that consciously, or maybe it's subliminal. But in classical music, traditionally women haven't been able to go sit in the audience and see something on stage that has anything to do with their lives. And so by writing this piece, I am hoping to have the orchestra be playing music that is a mirror to women in the audience. And when you see something on stage that resembles you, you're going to have an interior dialogue with it. Your mind is going to be bringing up memories and thoughts, and you're going to be thinking along with it in a much more profound way. By writing this piece, I hope that the Wyoming Symphony Orchestra and I are being able to set a precedent for bringing women's stories to the stage so that women going to concerts from now until the end of eternity will be able to have these important inner dialogues with themselves and what's on stage, and to be able to feel recognized by the artistic community. I'm very excited to be telling this important story for Wyoming.